Going to take you live to Canberra now, the Greens MP Adam Bandt.
Over recent months, and that makes it all the more important that Australians are able to have confidence that when deals are signed on the big mining and resource projects that we're lucky to have in this country, that we know that locals, people who are wanting work, people who've recently been retrenched, will be put to the head of the queue by the government. What we've seen over the last few days is the problem with having these enterprise migration agreements completely in the hands of the minister, without any minimum standards and shrouded in secrecy. I'll be introducing a private members bill to Parliament when we resume, and I've given notice of it today, that would require the government, before it approves an EMA, to make sure that the project has advertised locally for workers, and has contacted the local jobs board, which will be established in law within 60 days of the passage of the bill, and gone through all reasonable steps to get people from anywhere around Australia who are ready, willing and able to work to the front of the queue on these projects. If an enterprise migration agreement is then made because they can't find enough local workers, the Workplace Relations Minister will have the power under my bill to require the companies on the project to employ a number of local workers, to offer a certain number of traineeships, to find specific numbers of jobs for long-term unemployed, and also to pay a levy that will go to the government to offset the costs of skills and training for local workers, so that in the future we're not in this position. This could be the first of about 30-odd projects that will qualify for one of these EMAs, and we need some very, very clear guidelines and some minimum standards in legislation so that we don't see a repeat of what we've just seen. This enterprise migration agreement with Roy Hill must also be made public. The Minister needs to table this enterprise migration agreement in Parliament so that we're able to look at it and make sure that it has benefits for the Australian population. If we have another 30 of these agreements and they're all secret, then we as parliamentarians and as the Australian public are not able to be confident that everything possible is being done to give locals, some of whom have been out of work for a very long time, some of whom have just lost their job, will go to the head of the queue. We'll obviously wait with interest to see what comes out of Labor's caucus meeting today, but given that there are a number of people who've raised concerns about what's happened over the last week and have called for greater oversight, it's a great opportunity to now come out in support of the Greens bill to protect local jobs.
What's your reading of the internal rumblings that are going on right now within Labor and that caucus that you spoke of? Are you optimistic that those concerns will be heeded in the government?
I think there's a very strong concern within members on the government benches that locals should be at the head of the queue for these jobs. And there is also a growing concern that there's not enough transparency around how these deals are negotiated and then what's in them when they are negotiated. So I hope that people will, that it's not just a flash in the pan with a few headlines in the weekend's newspapers, but it actually, we now use this opportunity to set a template, given that there are potentially going to be dozens more of these EMAs approved.
And do you buy into the idea that the Prime Minister wasn't, spoken to properly about this, wasn't consulted on this properly? Or?
Look, I'll leave all of those things for commentary for people within the Labor Party. They obviously know what went on and they can comment on those things. But I do take heart from the Prime Minister's comments that she is concerned about making sure that local jobs come first, and so I'm hopeful that the government as well as the Labor backbenchers will look at this bill favourably.
And if local jobs aren't given to Australians first, should it be enshrined into legislation that safeguards are put into place that foreign workers aren't treated as second-class citizens?
Yeah, look, I think it's a very important issue. There is a very real risk that when people are brought into these projects that are often in very remote places that can be difficult to access, especially if they're people who are unfamiliar with the Australian system and how you might make a complaint if you feel that you're being underpaid. There is a very real concern that we are going to exploit an overseas workforce. Now, if we've been through, jumped through the hoops and there is a case to be made for bringing people in for overseas, then they must be paid the equivalent of what a local would be paid, and there must be rigorous enforcement around that. Now, there's been a number of complaints over a number of months about things that have been happening on some of these work sites, and in my view they've gone under-investigated, and if we are willing to allow people who aren't familiar with our industrial relations system to come in and work in the country, then we have an obligation to make sure there's a well-resourced enforcement agency to ensure that they're going to get paid the right wages and conditions, to ensure that their accommodation is up to scratch as well. And at the moment, I don't think the government's doing enough on that front.
And that's where we'll leave the Greens MP Adam Bandt talking about his bill to regulate enterprise mining agreement and calling on the minister to table the agreement with mining magnate Gina Rinehart in Parliament.